skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain.
About 2.5 million teenagers are affected by sexually transmitted diseases each year. The AIDS virus is transmitted through sexual contact.
Girls are denied the right to abortion, and in Roe v. Wade, we found sanctuary.
If you're a thinking, biblically informed Christian, you know that there's something radically wrong with America today. The questions are, how did we get here? And what must we do to get out of the mess that we're in? Politicians in both parties keep giving us empty promises, telling us how their latest governmental program or legislation is going to save us. But things keep getting worse. The deficits continue. The national debt goes up. Test scores go down. Crime flourishes while justice is dying. Millions of American jobs have been shipped overseas, and now it often takes two incomes for a family just to survive. In the next half hour, we're going to look at America's problems, and then we're going to consider some real solutions. Some simple solutions that at first may seem extreme. But I want you to understand something. They wouldn't be even the least bit radical to most Americans just 2 or 3 generations ago. These solutions are based on the principles hailed by Patrick Henry, George Washington, John and Samuel Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Booker T. Washington, and Teddy Roosevelt. Principles of liberty, self-government under God, freedom from government tyranny and intrusion, freedom from oppressive taxes. The ideas we're about to examine are only as radical as those that gave birth to America.
In the early 1600s, the Pilgrims began the steady stream of men, women, and children who immigrated to America with one driving passion: the desire to be free. One glaring exception to the pursuit of freedom was American slavery. Tens of thousands of men, women, and children were brought from Africa to America against their wills and enslaved. America paid dearly for this horrifying betrayal of the principles of freedom. Nevertheless, for over 250 years, those seeking freedom hazarded their lives crossing the Atlantic. Others risked their lives crossing the uncharted Allegheny Mountains. Others endured the bitter hardships of crossing the howling plains of the Midwest. And still others ventured their lives crossing the dizzying Rocky Mountains, all for one thing: freedom. Religious freedom, political freedom, financial freedom, family freedom. For generations, against all odds, families took their lives in their hands to carve out a place where they and their descendants could be free. This love of freedom, coupled with hatred of government tyranny, eventually compelled the colonists to defend their liberties and revolt against British oppression. For 150 years before the War of Independence, and for the majority of 150 years afterwards, America lived with unparalleled opportunities and freedoms. And what do you think the tax burden was on the average American while we became the greatest, most free, most prosperous nation on earth? Between 1 and 3%. Think about it. Only 1 to 3% in total taxes. In that atmosphere of freedom, freedom from tyrannical laws, freedom from oppressive taxes, America became the wonder and envy of the world. The principles of liberty and self-sufficiency based on Christian ethics were so deeply rooted that even during the Great Depression, men traveled from city to find jobs rather than resort to crime. We had no drive-by shootings. You could go to sleep at night in our cities with your door unlocked, without fear of being robbed or murdered in the night. Today, in many areas, you aren't even safe on the streets in broad daylight. What has gone wrong? During the Great Depression, the federal government made a fatal change in direction. The federal government abandoned the principles of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, principles of individual freedom and responsibility, and the government arrogated to itself the role of provider and caretaker. Federal politicians rejected the tried and true principles of liberty and justice put in place by George Washington, Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams, and other founders, and took on a messianic role, embracing the foolishness of Marxist socialist thought. In other words, the government decided it would become our savior. Any efforts the government made to be our Messiah were doomed from the start. We know the Savior was born in Bethlehem, not Washington, D.C. Government as Savior programs blossomed in the 1930s and continued to grow over the next 3 decades, exploding in the 1960s when LBJ launched his so-called Great Society and his so-called War on Poverty. Now, with over 60 years of history to study, with 2 and even 3 generations of able-bodied people on welfare, we see the stark truth. LBJ's Great Society isn't so great. His programs have all but destroyed the people and institutions they were supposed to save. Let's look at the impact of welfare on one segment of American society, a segment of America that the War on Poverty was supposed to rescue: African Americans. In 1950, the illegitimacy rate in the black community was about 14%. Today, according to government statistics, 67% of black children are born out of wedlock. That's 2 out of 3 children. The vast majority of the mothers are on welfare, and if a mother marries the father of her child, the payment is cut. In other words, she gets money to live an irresponsible life, but loses money to be responsible by getting married. Our insane government policies promote immorality and reward irresponsibility. And then what happens to these children born out of wedlock? According to the Justice Department, 1 in 4 black males under 25 is in jail, in prison, on parole, or on probation. 1 in 4. And this cancer isn't just eating away at black America, but all America. The illegitimacy rate among white Americans is skyrocketing, and we can expect a similar impact on the nation. The figures are clear and incontrovertible. Tens of thousands of young men, white, black, Hispanic, and Indian, who grow up in fatherless homes because of our failed welfare system, now fill our jails and prisons. But the insanity of welfare doesn't just impact crime. Study after study has shown that children who grow up with 2 parents do better in school, and that they are more successful and prosperous as adults. The reality is that the government welfare experiment at the federal and state levels has failed miserably. It must be completely dismantled and replaced with truly compassionate poverty relief that is personal and voluntary, not government-run.
This is the Orthos Forum, and we approve this message.